Something's happening to the middle class, and it's not by accident. Your grandparents lived the dream. Your parents tried to hold on. You're watching it disappear. And it's not because you're lazy or didn't work hard or made bad choices. It's because there's a pattern, one that's played out over and over again for more than 2,000 years. Every major empire that built a strong middle class eventually destroyed it. Rome did, Spain did, France, Britain, the Soviet Union, Japan, all followed the same path, step for step, right up to the edge. And now, America's standing there too. In 100 AD, Rome was thriving. Farmers owned their land, craftsmen ran their shops, ordinary citizens had real security. But by 400 AD, that world was gone. The middle class didn't fade, it was erased. Spain's merchants in the 1500s, they rose on the flood of silver from the New World, then drowned in the inflation it caused. France's professionals in the 1700s built the Enlightenment, then lost everything to revolution. Britain's proud shopkeepers and teachers saw their world shrink after the empire crumbled. The Soviet Union created a class of educated professionals, engineers, doctors, scientists. But when the system collapsed, their life savings became worthless overnight. Japan, once the model of stability, now has a generation too poor to start families. 6 empires, 6 extinctions. Different times, different continents, same outcome. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. That pattern, the one that ended them, is unfolding again right now in the United States. Since 1945, America has moved through the same 8 stages every fallen empire has followed. From post-war prosperity to political chaos, the sequence never changes. Wages rose, then they stalled. Debt replaced growth. Assets inflated, wealth concentrated. Mobility vanished. Trust collapsed. And when trust dies, history says the next stage is never stability. It's collapse or revolution. Right now, in 2025, the United States isn't in decline. It's deep in stage 7, the same point Rome, France, and the USSR reached, right before everything fell apart. The warning signs are blinking everywhere, but most people are too busy surviving to see them. The middle class isn't slipping. It's being written out of existence. And if history is right, if this pattern holds the way it always has, then what comes next isn't recovery. It's reckoning. Every empire's story starts the same, with confidence, growth and pride, and ends in disbelief that it could all vanish. But the fall isn't random. It follows a sequence so precise it's almost eerie. An 8-stage pattern that's destroyed every major civilization that built a middle class. Stage 1 is prosperity and growth. The golden years when life feels stable, when hard work really pays off. It's the sweet spot after a war or a great rebuilding, when wages rise. Homes are affordable, and everyone believes tomorrow will be better than today. Then comes stage 2, the peak. The middle class is strong, families are comfortable, and optimism feels permanent. Nobody sees the storm coming because everything still looks fine on the surface. But stage 3 begins quietly. Wage stagnation and rising debt. Productivity keeps climbing, but paychecks stop growing. People don't panic at first. They borrow to fill the gap. Credit cards, car loans, student loans. Small fixes that become chains. Then stage 4 hits, asset inflation. Prices for homes, healthcare, and education start racing ahead of income. What used to be normal, owning a house, sending your kids to college, starts feeling like a luxury. And that's when the real fear sets in, because people sense the ladder they were told to climb is being pulled away. Stage 5 is polarization. Wealth piles up at the top, while the middle hollows out. Suddenly, it's not hard work that determines success. It's inheritance, connections, or luck. Society splits into two tiers: those who own assets that inflate, and those who chase wages that don't. Then, stage 6, the death of mobility. The dream of doing better than your parents fades. If you're born rich, you stay rich. If you're born poor, you stay poor. Hope doesn't just weaken, it dies. And when hope dies, everything else follows. That's when stage 7 begins: political instability. People stop believing the system can be fixed. They turn on institutions, on leaders, and eventually on each other. Populism rises, extremes gain traction, and the middle, the stabilizing force, collapses. After that, only one stage remains. Stage 8, the end. Sometimes it's collapse, like Rome and the Soviet Union. Sometimes it's revolution, like France. But it always comes. The pattern never breaks. And every sign says America is already deep in stage 7. What happens next depends on whether the country can do what no empire in history has done before: break the pattern before it breaks us. History doesn't whisper, it screams. And the first time it shouted this warning was in Rome. 2,000 years ago, Rome's middle class looked unstoppable. Around 100 AD, small farmers owned their land, craftsmen sold their goods, soldiers returned from campaigns with enough savings to start families. It was stability built on hard work and pride. The same kind of story Americans once told themselves. But by 400 AD, that middle class was gone. What happened? The empire stopped expanding, but the bills didn't stop coming. Defending borders, feeding armies, keeping the machine running, it all cost more than the system could handle. So emperors did what leaders always do when they run out of real money. They created fake money. They diluted their silver coins, stretching value thinner with every new minting. At first, nobody noticed. Then, prices started to rise. Savings disappeared. Farmers sold land to survive. The wealthy swooped in, buying property for a fraction of its worth. Sound familiar? Within a century, Rome's small landowners had become tenants on estates owned by the rich. The middle collapsed into two classes: a tiny elite and a desperate mass. When that happened, mobility vanished. If you were born poor, you stayed poor. And once the hope of a better life disappeared, the empire's heart stopped beating. What followed was chaos. 50 emperors in 50 years, civil wars, currency collapse, and finally the fall. Rome didn't burn in a day. It withered over generations until there was nothing left to hold it together. Then came Spain, 15 centuries later, with the same illusion of endless wealth. In the 1500s, silver from the New World poured in by the ton. Spain became the richest nation on earth almost overnight. A proud merchant middle class rose from that fortune. Traders, bankers, professionals. The beating heart of a global empire. But easy money is poison. The silver flooded markets, prices soared, and inflation crushed the very class it had created. Wages couldn't keep up. Taxes rose. Debt exploded. By 1650, the middle class was gone, swallowed by the very wealth that was supposed to make them invincible. Spain's empire rotted from the inside out. They'd thought gold and silver would make them powerful forever. Instead, it made them hollow. That's the terrifying part. Both Rome and Spain fell for the same trap, thinking prosperity was permanent, thinking the system was unshakable. And every time the same 8 stages played out like clockwork. The chilling truth? America's already moved past where both of them were before their collapse. And the next part of the story isn't ancient history. It's the preview of what happens next. France's fall didn't come quietly. It came with fire, fury, and disbelief. In the early 1700s, the French middle class was thriving. Lawyers, merchants, scholars, small landowners. They worked hard, paid taxes, built their lives around the promise that effort led to advancement. But by the late 1700s, that promise was broken. Wars drained the treasury. The aristocracy hoarded privilege. And the tax burden fell squarely on the middle and lower classes. The rich paid nothing, the poor had nothing, and those in between carried everything. Bread prices soared, wages froze. People watched their savings shrink while the elite threw parties at Versailles. That's when something inside the middle class snapped. They'd done everything right, worked, studied, contributed, and still they were being crushed. Hope turned to rage, and in 1789, that rage exploded. The French Revolution wasn't born from poverty. It was born from betrayal. The people who believed in the system finally realized the system would never believe in them. They overthrew the monarchy, toppled the old order, and for a brief moment thought they were free. But history has a cruel twist. Revolutions rarely rebuild what they destroy. The middle class that lit the fuse was devoured by the flames it started. France descended into chaos, bloodshed, and the terror that followed. The middle class didn't win. It vanished. And then came Britain. A slower story, but no less tragic. In the early 1900s, Britain's middle class was strong, proud, and secure. Shopkeepers, teachers, clerks, the steady hands of a powerful empire. After World War I, they still believed the system worked. But behind the pride, cracks were forming. The empire was bleeding money. Wages stopped growing. Housing costs rose. Education tilted toward the wealthy. The decline didn't announce itself with a revolution. It crept in quietly, paycheck by paycheck, decade by decade. By the 1970s, inflation had gutted savings. Strikes shut down cities, and faith in the system evaporated. The British middle class didn't explode, it eroded. By the 2000s, the children of that once prosperous generation faced stagnant wages, impossible housing prices, and fewer opportunities than their parents. The decline wasn't televised. It was lived. France fell with a roar. Britain faded with a sigh. But the outcome was the same. A proud middle class, first betrayed, then broken. The chilling truth? America is showing signs of both, the anger of France and the exhaustion of Britain. And when those two forces collide, the outcome is never calm. By the time the Soviet Union rose, people thought the world had moved past the old mistakes. That modern systems were too organized, too scientific to collapse. But history doesn't care how advanced a country thinks it is. By the 1960s, the USSR had built its own version of a middle class. Engineers, doctors, scientists, teachers, people with steady jobs, education, and a sense of pride. They didn't own property, but they had something rarer in that world. Security. It felt stable, almost eternal. And then the pattern began again. The economy slowed, wages froze, and cracks spread through the illusion of equality. The black market replaced official stores. People who'd believed in the system started to cheat it just to survive. By the late 1980s, inflation was devouring savings. The ruble collapsed. The shelves were empty. And in 1991, the entire Soviet Union simply stopped existing. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your country, your currency, your future were all gone overnight. Decades of work and savings turned into dust. The middle class didn't fade. It was erased in months. The dream of stability became a memory. But not all collapse comes with explosions. Some happen in silence. Japan is living proof. In the 1980s, Japan had the strongest middle class on the planet. 90% of the population identified as middle class. Lifetime jobs, affordable homes, booming cities. It looked like a permanent paradise. Then in 1990, the bubble burst. Real estate and stocks crashed. Companies froze wages. And suddenly, the future stopped moving. For 30 years, Japan's economy flatlined. Prices didn't rise, but neither did paychecks. The middle class didn't die all at once. It aged. It shrank. It lost the will to dream. Today, young Japanese work multiple jobs, live alone, and postpone families because they simply can't afford them. Birth rates have collapsed. Hope has quietly bled out of the culture. No revolution, no riots, just a slow fade into silence. The Soviet Union vanished in chaos. Japan is disappearing in slow motion. Two completely different societies, one authoritarian, one peaceful, yet both trapped in the same 8-stage spiral. And that's what makes it so unsettling. If both extremes, command economy and capitalist democracy, can end the same way, what does that say about where America is heading now? The pattern's still unfolding, but there's something different this time. Something no empire before has ever had. Maybe it's a chance to break the cycle, or maybe it's just the calm before the storm. America's story was supposed to be different. After World War II, the nation was unstoppable. Half the world's industrial power, factories booming, families thriving. A single income could buy a house, raise kids, and save for retirement. College was cheap, healthcare was manageable, and hard work actually meant progress. That was stage one, prosperity. Stage two came fast, the peak. By 1970, nearly 60% of Americans were solidly middle class. The dream was real. And everyone believed it would last forever. But the third stage crept in quietly. Wages froze while prices didn't. Productivity kept rising, but the gains went to executives and shareholders instead of workers. To keep up, families borrowed. Credit cards, student loans, car loans, 1,000 small lifelines that became chains. Then stage 4 hit. Asset inflation. The cost of everything that defined middle-class life exploded. In 1970, a home cost 2 times the average income. Now it's 7. College tuition rose faster than any other expense. Healthcare became a gamble with bankruptcy. What your grandparents could afford on 1 income now takes 2, and even then, it's barely enough. Stage 5, polarization. The top 1% accumulated more wealth than the bottom 90 combined. The middle class shrank from 60% of the population to about 50%. And half of that 50% is one missed paycheck away from falling out entirely. Stage 6 followed. Mobility collapsed. In 1940, 90% of Americans earned more than their parents. Today, it's less than half. Hard work no longer guarantees progress. You can do everything right and still fall behind. The dream has become a lottery. Then came stage 7, the one we're living right now. Trust has evaporated. Congress, media, courts, elections. Every institution that once held the country together now divides it. Each side blames the other. But the truth is simpler and darker. Both sides are terrified that the system can't be fixed. Inflation eats savings, rent devours paychecks, and every year feels a little harder than the one before. The middle class isn't dying, it's almost gone. And here's the part that chills historians. Every time a society has reached this point, stage 8 has followed. Collapse or revolution. Rome had it. France had it. The USSR had it. The only question left is which version America will face. A sudden breakdown or a slow, grinding unraveling. Either way, the clock is ticking. The pattern that ended 6 empires is already written into this one. And unless something unprecedented happens soon, the future won't just echo history. It'll repeat it. Every empire reaches this point, the cliff where everything still looks normal, but the ground underneath is already crumbling. That's stage 8, the moment when the system can no longer pretend it's working. Some call it collapse. Others call it revolution. Either way, it's the end of the story as it was written. In Rome, it was the slow suffocation of an economy that couldn't sustain its own weight. In France, it was the mob storming the Bastille. In the Soviet Union, it was the quiet death of faith. One morning, a country that had stood for 70 years simply didn't exist anymore. For the United States, the final chapter hasn't been decided yet, but the writing is appearing on the wall. The debt keeps rising, the trust keeps falling, and the middle class, once the stabilizing force, is vanishing. History says this is the moment when empires break. But there's something America still has that most of them didn't. Time, awareness, and choice. The pattern isn't destiny, it's a warning. Collapse isn't instant, it's a process. The question is whether the country wakes up before the pattern finishes what it started. Reform is the rarest path in history, but not impossible. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, America came close to breaking, and instead it rebuilt. Fair wages, social security, affordable housing, unions, education. It was a miracle born from desperation. Could that happen again? Maybe, but not without pain, not without change, and not without recognizing what's really dying here. It's not just jobs or wages, it's belief. The belief that effort leads to progress, that fairness matters, that tomorrow can still be better than today. If that belief can be restored, the pattern could break for the first time in 2,000 years. But if it can't, stage 8 will arrive the way it always has. Sudden, final, and irreversible. You can feel it in every argument, every headline, every exhausted sigh of someone working harder than ever and still falling behind. That's not decline. That's the sound of a middle class reaching extinction. History doesn't repeat because people forget. It repeats because people think they're the exception. Rome thought so. France thought so. Every empire thought so. And now, America stands in the same place, staring into the same abyss, still believing it can't happen here. But the pattern doesn't care what we believe. It only cares what we do next. Because if this really is stage 7 turning into stage 8, then the window to change the story is closing fast.